If UFC wasn't already crazy enough, in the post-fight press conference, Dana White pulls up and announces three new massive fights. We have Conor McGregor taking on Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev defending his belt against Dustin Poirier, and then Strickland taking on Paulo Costa. So in this video, I kind of just wanted to give my initial thoughts on these matchups. So we're going to start off with Conor McGregor. We have to, biggest star in the sport. Conor McGregor will be taking on Michael Chandler, UFC 303, June 29th, International Fight Week. It's about time this fight was announced. It seems like we've been talking about this matchup for like a year. Both these dudes have been out forever. Obviously, McGregor coming off like the foot, ankle, leg injury against Dustin Poirier. His last fight was in July of 2021. Michael Chandler's last fight was May of 2022. He's really just been holding out, waiting for this opportunity. So you kind of got to feel at least a little bit good for Michael Chandler. He really could have gotten screwed in this scenario if they went a different direction. He's waited so long. I mean, these are prime years of his career, but it looks like he's going to get the payoff. He's going to get this fight. I think stylistically, it's super interesting, especially if Michael Chandler fights in kind of like the low IQ way he has as of late, right? Because if Chandler goes out there and just explodes and wrestles Conor, it's not going to be a great matchup. But Chandler really hasn't done that throughout his UFC run. He's wanted to stand and bang, even with dudes who are getting the better of him on the feet. Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, he still, isn't super concerned about using his wrestling. I guess he tried a little bit in the Gaethje fight, and then in like the second round of the Poirier fight, but he always starts out just chucking bombs. And if you're going to do that with Conor McGregor, you're going to put yourself in danger for a counter shot. So I think it's super interesting stylistically. I just really hope it sticks together. Hopefully it's actually signed for all these fights. The UFC likes to announce stuff before it's actually finalized, so assuming these are all good to go, like the matchup, hope we get it June 29th. We'll be very excited for that. A great International Fight Week start. And then the second matchup that I mentioned, Islam Makhachev defending his title against Dustin Poirier at UFC 302, June 1st. It kind of seemed like it was trending towards Islam Makhachev defending his title at UFC 302, but I think the opponent was up in the air. And I really don't think this was finalized until after we saw the UFC 300 fights. I think Dustin Poirier had talked about like he was going to be fighting Islam Makhachev, but I really don't think it would have made sense for the UFC to lock that in until they saw what happened in the fights, right? Because heading into UFC 300, you had two different guys, Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje. Both those guys had kind of earned title shots, if we're being honest. Gaethje with the win over Rafael Fiziev, the great knockout over Dustin Poirier, he was deserving. And then Charles Oliveira, he was the champion, won a few title fights, knocked out Beneil Dariush after losing to Islam Makhachev. He was right in the mix. I mean, he had the opportunity. He had the cut that forced him out. So both those dudes had earned title shots, but they ended up taking fights at UFC 300. Islam is going to fight later in the year in Abu Dhabi in October, but he wanted to get a fight in before that. So it kind of left this interesting situation where one of those guys, if they won, maybe if they won super clean, they could turn around and fight June 1st. But if not, it kind of left an opening for someone else in the division. And the guy who took advantage of that opening was Dustin Poirier, because looking at the 300 results, you had Justin Gaethje getting absolutely flatlined. He's out of the title picture. In the Charles Oliveira-Arman Tsarukyan fight, it was a competitive back-and-forth fight, but Arman Tsarukyan wins. It looks like Max Holloway wants to go back down to 145, fight against Ilia Topuria. So now you really only have like one super legit viable contender in Arman Tsarukyan. And what's the point of making him have a super quick turnaround to fight here June 1st, where you could just have him fight in Abu Dhabi? Obviously, that's assuming that Islam Makhachev goes out and beats Dustin Poirier, which is certainly not a guarantee. But I'm not going to be bummed about this matchup. You're getting to watch Dustin Poirier fight. The dude always delivers. It'll be great to see him get another crack. Now, he's probably going to be a pretty huge underdog in this matchup, but who knows? Islam Makhachev is not the same type of wrestler as Khabib. He's not on that level. On the other hand, he is way more dangerous as a striker, so we definitely have to keep that in mind, but I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, we're all going to watch this one go down, and I will just say, you got to feel bad for both Gaethje and Charles Oliveira, and I think there has to be some questions on the people advising them or even their own decision-making on why they took the fights at UFC 300, because even if the UFC is pushing them to do it, you've got to be looking at, Islam Makhachev's schedule. They knew they were probably going to be going to Abu Dhabi later in the year, and there was no one viable for him to fight, who was super deserving of an opportunity. So if just one of those guys turned down their fights at UFC 300, they're probably getting this title opportunity. Now Gaethje, seems pretty firmly out of the mix. Charles is still in there, but he's obviously not fighting for the title. He's going to have to build himself back up. So tough for those guys. Dustin takes advantage of it. Good on him for jumping on the opportunity. Sometimes it's the right time, right place. We're seeing that with the next pay-per-view. Steve Erceg, right? Dude's ranked number 10 in the world. He's getting a title shot. Sometimes that happens. Other times there's a buildup of contenders, and you have to fight a million times. So it's all about timing, and the timing for Dustin is very good. And shout out to Islam for, actually wanting to get 2 fights in this year. And then the third matchup that was announced, Sean Strickland taking on Paulo Costa, UFC 302, so the co-main event for the Islam Poirier card. This is going to be a 5-round co-main event. I think this fight makes a lot of sense for both. UFC's going towards the Duplessis Adesanya route. Sean Strickland was campaigning for the rematch. Looks like he's not going to get it, but he does get this big slot in the co-main against Paulo Costa. And then for Costa, even though he's coming off a loss, it's against Robert Whittaker. You don't really lose any stock losing to Robert Whittaker, especially in such a fun fight. So you could have, had Costa fight back in the rankings, but middleweight's such a mess at this point where it seemed like you were either going to have Strickland fight maybe Jared Cannonier in a rematch. Maybe he rematches Brendan Allen. But if we're talking about like a big name star power matchup, Strickland Costa is probably the best you're going to get with the available options. The only thing that kind of throws me off about this matchup is that if you're Sean Strickland, and it seems like originally he didn't really like the belt, he didn't want to be attached to the belt. After he lost the belt, it seems like he really wants that belt back. I don't know about the timing of this matchup because it's kind of in the same range as that Whittaker-Khamzat Chimaev matchup, and I'd be pretty shocked if the Whittaker-Khamzat winner did not get the title shot. So they may be stuck in this spot where they're fighting, but then maybe do they each need one more opportunity before they get back to the belt? I think Paulo Costa probably would anyway. But for Sean Strickland, if he felt like he was right there deserving of a rematch, if he beats Paulo Costa, I don't know if he's walking right into another title opportunity unless he's taking a pretty long layoff. But UFC 300 was obviously amazing. We have some fun fights coming, in the next few months. Obviously, UFC 301, not so great, but looks like 302 is going to be solid with Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier, Strickland Costa, and then the UFC always stacks Fight Island. And if McGregor's headlining the card, obviously it's going to be must-see TV. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button. How are we feeling about these matchups? I'm going to be putting out videos, all week on UFC 300, stuff about the future. So stay tuned for all those. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.